Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Tuesday morning, January 17th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And the chat room is open. I don't have any links in there. But we're talking about some PDFs and whatnot and articles from a couple different websites this last few weeks, and sort of looking at the spiritual side of my healing journey. And this is my healing journey here in the morning. This is my, all of this, the One Child Abuse Survivor to Another shows have been my healing journey. And I've come a long, long way. I mean, I started out, like most survivors who've had, problems and issues with past abuse issues and behavioral issues and just depression or just being down or being angry or whatever, to where I'm at today, which is pretty comfortable. Like I'm doing really quite well. And I hope that most people who listen to these shows are some of them are my friends. Thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate it. Some of you, I don't know who you are. Nobody, a lot of people don't, actually most people don't contact me to tell me they listen to my shows. So I really don't know who a lot of the people are listening to my shows, except for people on Blog Talk that I can tell who's tuned in. But a lot of psychologists and psychotherapists and psychiatrists and students who are studying psychology and psychiatry listen to my shows. And so what I'm hoping is that there'll be something useful there for them to see, my journey without meds, without professional help, all self-help, that I've been able to just using material that I found off the web and using for survivors of abuse. For instance, the website, the ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse Survivor to Thriver Workbook. I use that pretty extensively. John Bradshaw's work, I've used his stuff. Looking at Robert Burney and quite a few other people, and just using their material, working through it on my own on this show. So pretty well that's what it's been. I don't do much else during the day. This is my healing journey. This is the time allotted for it, and I don't do any other work during the day. Sometimes in the evenings I'll be working on things, particular issues and whatnot after work usually, and but it was kind of hit and miss, because I'm so busy. But most of my stuff has been done in very quick increments during the day, I would say about an hour, a period of about an hour a day. So this has been my healing journey. I hope that people have found it, helpful and useful, and not that what worked for me would work for anybody else, and not what worked for somebody else may not work for me. The issue is that it's just to show a process that through it, through getting some help, and get whatever kind of help it is, and working through this stuff, and if you're not safe enough to do it on your own, then you need to get help. It's doable. It's completely doable. And, like this morning, I really wanted to talk about, just continue on where we left off last week, and that was just talking on Thursday, was talking about the issue of the self, and the issues that we really can't change our past. No matter how we look at it, whether we want to look at it secularly or biblically, you can't change the past. And I knew that I couldn't change the way that I was feeling. I knew that I wasn't going to, I knew that myself, just with my information that I had, was getting me nowhere. Because 5 years ago when I started my healing journey, I was in a pretty sad state of affairs. And I was, seriously considering self-injuring and was feeling like I needed to plan my suicides again. That was 5 years ago, and I was just so down. The information I had within me was not enough to help me to get through this stuff. And so I realized that, wow, I'm going to have to reach out, or I'm going to have to do something, because I can't stay like this. I wanted change, and I wanted to feel better, and I wanted to have a decent life, and I wanted to be able to find joy and peace in my heart. And 5 years ago, that's what happened. So, you have to listen to at your own discretion to all of my shows. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive subject, and you have to know what's good for you to listen to. So if you go back and you listen to the archives, just realize that I'm talking about a lot of really serious stuff that's not really for children. It's not for younger children. And so anyone 18 and under, I ask that you have permission to listen to my shows. And also, if you're a survivor who's just starting out your healing journey, be very cautious what you're listening to, whether it's my stuff or anybody's stuff, because it can trigger. You don't want that. You want to go forward in your healing journey, not backward. Right? So make sure you listen at your own discretion and realize whether the topics of abuse are going to bother you or not. Right? This is a huge issue for people, and if you're not sure, then don't listen. Right? You need to be 100% sure that it's okay for you to listen to anything like this, whether it's my show or anybody else's. So, make the right choice for yourself, right? It's very important as far as your healing journey goes. And young people, have permission to listen to my shows. Get permission from an adult, somebody who can help you make a decision, whether you should be listening to them or not. There's a lot of adult content on my shows, and they're not for younger children, even though it's all about child abuse and stopping child abuse, right? And abuse, period. But we'll get right into this. I just, going forward from what I was talking about there, this it's been an amazing time because, it's been painful. The last few years, especially the last 6-7 months, working through the CSA incest that I suffered as a child, that part of me wants to just say, part of me wants to go back to where I was when I was a child and just forget it. You know what I mean? Because it was so, it's so hard to deal with. You know what I mean? And you almost want to just, as many survivors I've seen out here want to almost be in denial about it. You know what I mean? It's like, well, it didn't happen, or that didn't happen to me. That wasn't me, And I knew that if I was ever going to heal and move forward, that I was going to have to work through that stuff. And it's pretty painful. And just the issues between, the loss of really a family that I never even really had, but was all I had. The destruction of this dysfunctional family around me. And it was my family, it was all I had. And as far as a family goes, as far as a child's mind goes, right? So my mind was stuck as a child, you know what I mean? And I could not seem to get connected to that part of myself in order to heal. And about 2 years ago is when I decided I was going to have to do that. And because I knew where the issues were, I could tell, because I'd done a whole lot of self introspection, just looking in, and thinking, okay, what's causing me to feel this way? Why am I not able to feel differently about it? And how am I going to feel differently about it? And, and what am I going to do to change these things and change my behaviors, these dysfunctional behaviors that I grew up with that I needed to change so that I can have healthier relationships, and learn how to have a healthy relationship. And then I moved from that over the last couple of years into how can I help other people, taking some of the stuff, the self-centered stuff off of myself and saying, how can I help others? Because as long as we're thinking about ourselves, we get stuck in that perpetual state of looking at ourselves. And really I don't believe a whole lot of progress can be made in that. I could have easily, over the last couple of years, just stayed on the grief part, or just stayed on the acknowledging and accepting part of the abuse that I suffered. Or I could have stayed on the anger part. I used to spend sometimes 2-3 months on that. If you go back and listen to my shows, they're not labeled properly. And it's because at the time I was so busy. I was incredibly busy, working full-time, not only that, volunteering full-time, and dealing with, trying to help my sweetheart who's terminally ill, who's still here, and he's still terminally ill. And myself just being so busy, I really didn't have time to set up the shows properly. I would just set them up, and they would just pop up automatically as a recurring show, and I didn't have time to go and label the show exactly what it was. So I think, now when time permits, I'm going to go back and I'll actually put what the show was about, be a little bit easier for people to see what I was talking about there, because all of those shows were systematic. It was what I was dealing with at the time. Not just sporadic. I didn't do any kind of real sporadic stuff at all. I've done about 900 shows, and they've all been consistently all about like one topic. Okay, then move on. Okay, depression, then move on. Okay, I guess I was depressed, right? So then looking at the anger. How am I going to deal with this anger? How am I going to deal with what this leftover rage and anger that I could still feel within me, right? Spent a lot of time on that, like probably 6 months on anger, if not close to that. Spending 2-3 months just looking at different pieces and different parts of it. And so it's a little hard to find those shows when it's almost random. Some of them I did label, some I didn't. And when I had time, I would try to go back and label shows and put more information for people so they can see what the show was about instead of just a lucky guess and grabbing one and going with it. But it was systematic, and it was all based on how I was feeling. So I didn't sit down ahead of time and write down what I was going to talk about. I was allowing myself to actually deal with this stuff when it needed to come up and when it needed to be dealt with. And as I was going through my journey, so hopefully, people will get something out of that to realize that it is a process. But if we stay in it, if I allowed myself to stay in that depression, in that feeling of despair, of sadness, of grief, I did a lot of grief stuff, talking a lot about grief and grieving. If I'm going to continually grieve and just concentrate on self, whatever it is, and I don't even want to say self-pity, but just self, just continually staying in that position of grief and sadness, despair, well, then I'm not going to make very much progress. And I realized that. So I thought, okay, how can I help other people? So I started taking myself out of the equation a little bit. And I've always sort of been interested in that, obviously, trying to help other people. But it became more of a focal point for me while I was working through my healing journey, and I realized that that's really what, something that's very helpful for me is to help other people. And so, I feel that a person, you either are that type or you're not, and I'm totally that type. I've been doing that my whole life, trying to help my mother, who was abusing me, my main abuser, trying to help my brother, who ended up abusing me, trying to help my dad, who ended up just being a complete jerk, trying to help other people, you know what I mean? It's like I've always been trying to help other people as well as myself, Hasn't been all just about everybody else. I'm very much balanced in that area, it's about me too, but it's not just only about me, you know what I mean? And so in my healing journey, I realized that it's not just only about me. I'm not the only person who's ever suffered out here, and I'm not the only survivor of abuse, you know what I mean? And so when I was doing the work, I would keep that in mind, and realize that this is not all about self. But unless we can take that and look outside of that, if we just stay stuck in that self-centered place, I really don't think a whole lot of progress can be made. Even though we need, I think it was perfectly okay that I went through and looked at each piece of this stuff because I needed to. I needed to go back and find out where I was wounded and how I dealt with it so that I could learn how to change the way that I felt about it as an adult, and to realize that, okay, no, I'm safe now. Okay, no, I've got a pretty decent life, Okay, so things are hard. Well, things are hard all over. It's like, look at the amount of people out here that are struggling. I mean, there's, and everybody's going to have struggles. Even the people that look and appear to be not struggling because maybe they have a big house and money in the bank. Does it mean that they're not going to have some struggle in their life? Not at all. They may have all kinds of issues going on. Actually, probably more than likely, everybody has got issues in their life, And so it depends on how we handle that stuff. But as adults, we got to stop thinking with a child's mind. What I had to do was stop. Like John Bradshaw, I did a lot of work on with his books, and he's like, you can't let that 5-year-old drive the bus, the bus of your life. You can't let that 8-year-old make your decisions for you. And that's exactly what I was doing. But I didn't realize it. I didn't see it until I started to actually do the work through it. So that's why I think that this was very helpful for me to do the work through this stuff so I could see this stuff because I didn't know. And I didn't want to get stuck in it. And so as each piece would come along, whether it was the grief work or the whatever it was, I would deal with it as long as I felt I needed to and then move on. And there was a few pieces that I wanted to go back and do some more of, and then I realized as I was looking into doing that, which was mainly the grief work and all, just the accepting acknowledgement of the abuse and stuff, I realized that I'd already done that. So I didn't need to go back and do that, It's quite interesting, just to actually do that. But I have spent a lot of time on this and really valuable time, like not just sitting around having a pity party and woe is me. I did that 5 years ago and almost killed myself. I took this on as a role of playing two people in my life, a counselor, a therapist, as one, and the other one was me. So I allowed myself to see things from a counselor's view, from a psychiatrist's view or a psychologist, and allowed myself to see, or a therapist or whatever. So I allowed myself to see these issues in my life in two different ways. And then what that did was took me out of that circle or out of that cycle of pain and allowed me to see where I should be, in my healing journey, you know what I mean? And that if I wasn't going to be open-minded about changing the way that I felt, it was never going to change. If I was just going to stay in this place of anger and hatred and rage and feeling so bitter about everything, then that was my choice, you know, clearly my choice, because nobody's forcing me to be there but me. And so, you know, I thought, well, how would this look to a therapist? You know, I need to think with a different mindset. I need to think, okay, I got to receive this. Somehow I have to be able to accept this stuff, and somehow I have to be able to accept the responsibility, which is my part in this, to change, because otherwise I was just going to stay the same old mess. And it's, you know, until people get that, until people realize that it is their responsibility, personal responsibility, it doesn't happen, you know, because so many times people don't want that responsibility. Well, that's right, because it's very painful. It's like, okay, I don't want that, you know, I don't want that responsibility. But in the meantime, if I didn't take on that responsibility and say, you know what, okay, all right, I'm open to change, I'm open to feeling better, I'm open to allow myself to heal, right, then I was just going to stay miserable. And this is the same position I was in my whole life. You know, I'd watched my mother, especially my mom, who was my main example of what not to do, and end up like her on my deathbed. Exactly like her, never accepting help, never getting better. And it was really because she would not take her focus off herself. She was always focused on herself and her problems. She never, ever, ever was interested in what somebody else was going through. As a matter of fact, if somebody said, oh, they were something, if they were sick or whatever, or they were experiencing problems in their life, she would immediately take the focus off them and put it on herself. And she would say, well, you don't know suffering like I do. It was all about her. Very, very self-centered person. That's why she couldn't love me. That's why my mother did what she did to all of us, and to herself, and to my dad, and everybody. She did that. She did all of that horrible stuff to us because she could not take herself out of the center of the picture. It all had to be about her. She did not care if her children were suffering. She didn't care if her children were dying. She didn't care if she almost killed her children. It was all about her. And, you know, and after she would beat me, it was all about her. The pain would be on her. She'd be like, look what she made me do. She's a horrible, rotten kid. You know, it would always be her. So she could never, ever, ever move past that. And on her deathbed, it was still all about her. You know what I mean? Like she was so self-centered and focused on the misery in her life that she couldn't see, and she was blinded to anything else. And I thought, man, I do not want to end up like that, you know. And I was heading down that road, and so many people are. And it's a miserable place to be because no one wants to be around you. Who wants to be around somebody like that when they're 60, 70 years old on their deathbed? Nobody. You know, it's like, no, at some point we have to make peace with this stuff. And at some point, you know, if we truly want to heal and say, okay, I'm a real survivor, I'm really doing this, then we have to take our responsibility. We have to take responsibility for our part, which is to allow ourselves to get help and move forward and not stay stuck in these situations of, oh, I just want to kill myself. Oh, life isn't worth living. That was my mom. That was my mom all over again. That's what she used to say on a regular basis, pretty well every other night after dinner. You know, I just want to die. Why can't I just die? Why can't I just kill myself? We had to listen to year after year after year after year. So it was no wonder that I was doing what I was doing. I was just following in my mother's footsteps. I was just following my parents' example. And that my dad would always be saying, well, we should have never been born. We're all evil seed. I should just kill us all for the devil. So on that, I had my mother's, you know, toxic stuff there, my dad's toxic stuff there, and what, we're supposed to come out okay? Well, two of my brothers killed themselves, right? One of my sisters wanted to kill herself. My other sister's in complete denial. And one of my brothers was murdered, so that doesn't really count. And another brother is in complete denial, too, because he can't deal with anything. So, yeah, it's like, wow, you know, I thought, man, I do not want to go that way. You know, I have to change these things. I have to change these things that are keeping me stuck in this cycle of this downward spiral, this life isn't worth anything, life doesn't mean anything, oh, I'm so wounded, and oh, I'm so hurt. And how do I change that? I thought, because I was wounded. See, I'm very realistic. I was abused. I was hurt badly. Well, you know what? I can't change. There is no way I can change that. I can't go back and change the past. It was like a light bulb came on to me. 5 years ago, a light bulb came on. I was like, wow, I'm really going to have to do some work here because I've been, I don't know. Like I was thinking that somehow I could somehow change all that. You know what I mean? It's like, no, my past is my past, is what it is. But if I stay focused on that, and that's all I'm going to focus on is the grief and the sorrow and and I was so wounded and I was so hurt and I was so hard done by, and which I was. That's the reality of it. The issue is if I'm going to stay stuck in that and not allow myself to move through the process and move through whatever I need to do to get through it, then it clearly is my responsibility. Because we are responsible for our adult lives. Absolutely we are. And people say, well, how can I do this? I was so hurt. I was so wounded. Well, if you take yourself out of the equation, it helps. Because the minute I started to take myself out of the equation and realize that, okay, stop concentrating so much on grief and sorrow and sadness and all this, and start getting busy concentrating on something else, which for me, really there's nothing more that means more in life than helping somebody. You know what I mean? Because all this other stuff to me is useless. It's not that I don't enjoy watching TV. I actually have some favorite programs, and I tape them so I can watch them. But I don't watch mindless garbage TV. I really don't. It doesn't get me anywhere. It doesn't make me laugh. It's not even funny. So what's the point of watching it? It doesn't mean anything to me. It's just meaningless, right? So I don't spend a lot of time doing that. I want to help people, and not only that, but I have a healthy balance because I have favorite TV shows that I like to watch. I have a real healthy balance going on. But I do tend to, I study a lot, so I do spend hours and hours studying, and I probably should be cleaning my apartment, but I really don't care, you know what I mean? Like, it's decent, right? It's not bad. But I do spend a lot of time studying and also thinking about how I can get involved to help other people, and I don't have a lot of time or a lot of like extra time, especially because I usually work full time, and my sweetheart's terminally ill. But things, it's like, well, what can I do, to make a difference in this world? Until we start taking our mind off of that grief and that sorrow, and we're still allowing ourselves to work through it, whether with a therapist or counselor or whoever we're working with, or whether it's self-help or whatever, like I was doing. But until we start taking the self out of the equation and, oh, me, woe is me, it's not going to ever happen. I mean, my mother was a clear case example. That's why I hope psychiatrists listen to this. I hope the students listen to this, so that they can see that all of my shows have been talking about this stuff, and that I understand the issues of mental health, like especially issues that are behavioral, things that are issues like codependency and all that. I totally get that now because I've done a whole lot of study on it. Anger-related issues, anger management. Looking back, I could just see all this stuff that my mother and my dad did. It was such a good example for me what not to do. Totally. And I was smart enough to realize it. So I'm so happy about that. So many people will continue on the cycle of abuse. Like so many people will even self-abuse. So many people will continue on in that cycle because it's all they know. And they don't want to look any further. They don't want to look around and see if there's something different out there. And it's like, well, that's really sad because that's complete ignorance. Like we can all develop, we can all do better. You know what I mean? And that should be the goal. Like if we're not growing, we're dead as far as I'm concerned in our lives. If we're not doing something to grow in some way, then what's the point? And a lot of people really don't care about that stuff. My parents didn't care about that stuff. They just wanted to live this miserable life, hurt each other, hurt their family, and then gloat to their friends about how great they were, right? My parents were very much narcissistic, very much, they were also, what do you want to call that, sadistic. They loved pain. They loved to inflict pain, and they liked to be in pain. My mom used to love it. She thrived on it because it made her feel important. It made her feel a sense of, as long as I can feel pain, I can feel something. Now that's freaking sad. It's like, okay, well, why not turn that around and feel some joy? Why not turn that around and be happy about something for once? I mean, not that her children had to be the be-all and end-all of her life, or her husband, that's wrong, actually. For a person to put everything into the children or everything into the husband. It has to be, there's a healthy balance in all of this, But there should be some joy because you have this family. Work through the stuff with your husband. Work through the stuff with your wife. What are you together for then if you're not going to work it through? I watched my parents batter each other physically until they got too old, and then batter each other verbally till the day that my mom died. I never saw a moment's peace with them people. And I watched them batter their children. I watched them batter me in every way. I'm talking physical battering, verbal battering, psychological battering, every kind of battering you can think of. That's how they were. That's how they lived their life. So I thought, okay, I do not want to live like that. I was forced into it as a child, but I don't have to stay there. So I was smart enough to realize that. And then in my healing journey, I realized, okay, so, 5 years ago, I was really down, really at my wit's end as far as how can I change this? How can I feel better? And I realized that no, I don't have to stay there in that. I don't have to stay there in that at all. Other people are healing. Other people are doing this stuff. There's no reason why I can't do it. And there's got to be something out there that will work for me. And I really started to search around and find what it was. And I knew for me it was God, because I'm very much a Christian, and I'm very much, that's my main part of my life, is God. But the thing is that I also looked at a lot of secular stuff too, because I realized there was some good stuff in there. And there is. And that's the whole issue. Find what works for you. Find the stuff that works for you, or find a therapist that works for you. Find a counselor for you that works for you, but don't get stuck. Don't allow yourself to stay in that misery and that horrible place. I mean, look at that article that came out. Who knows if it's even true or not. Sinead O'Connor, who tried to kill herself there, that Irish singer. I mean, I know who she is, but that doesn't mean everybody does. But Sinead O'Connor, and I like Sinead O'Connor. She was abused as a child, and the issue is she's got kids. She's got 4 kids, and she's trying to kill herself. And she was ordained as a priest. And she's got this awesome, wonderful life, and she can't see it. She has this awesome, wonderful life, and she cannot see it. She wants to kill herself. You know what? My mother was the same exact way. She had this awesome life with this beautiful set of children, a whole bunch of kids that loved her and actually doted on her, really, even though she was abusing the crap out of all of us. We loved her, And she could have turned that around, and she could have realized that, hey, I got a good life. And my dad could have done the same thing. He could have been like, I got a good wife. Wow, let's just start living. Let's start having a good time. Let's start finding meaning in all of this and joy in all of this. But did they? No, they just wanted to die. That was their main focus, is that my mother wanted to kill herself or just die. Oh, I should just die. Why can't I just die? She would cry and she would cry. Well, that's Sinead O'Connor doing the same thing. I'll just kill myself. She's got 4 kids. She's been ordained as a priest. She's got a beautiful voice. She's had a very interesting life, but she was abused as a child. But she refuses to get out of that. She's going to stay in that cycle of perpetual disease thinking. And it's like it's not something we have to stay in. You don't have to stay there. It's a choice. We choose to stay in those pits. We choose to stay in those valleys. Right? We choose to stay in that despair because that's what we're comfortable in. Well, I'm not no longer comfortable in that. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to sit there and it's not going to mean that it doesn't mean I'm in denial at all. I know where I was. I was in the pits of hell. But I don't want to stay there, And so 5 years ago, I just decided to climb out, And, I'm happy that I made that choice. But whatever you do, do not ever give up, right? Because that's not an option. Don't give up. Keep looking for whatever works for you. Keep looking for whatever's going to help you out, And don't ever give up searching for that truth that's going to help you to get through this stuff, right? Whatever it is, right? Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon. I'll probably be on Thursday morning. So same time, same place. Take good care. If you can't reach somebody, phone a crisis line. Whatever you do, don't allow yourself to be destroyed by this, by your past or by the stuff that's going on in your life now. Get some help, right? Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.